I found an old suitcase in the garage belonging to my late husband. I hadn't opened it in 15 years. Inside were stacks of cash and a key with an address. When I arrived and knocked on the door, a stranger woman. Good day, dear listeners. It's Diana again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also, let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Carol Merritt. I am 58 years old, I live in Dayton, Ohio, and for 15 years I have told myself that I was the kind of woman who had made peace with the past. I was wrong. Robert and I were married for 22 years. We met at a church picnic in the summer of 1985. He was tall, square-jawed, with a way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the room. We bought the house on Clover Street when I was 31. We painted the kitchen yellow together. We argued about money the way all couples do, and made up the way most couples don't bother to anymore. We had a good life. That is what I told people when they asked. That is what I told myself. Robert died of a heart attack in April of 2009. He was 54. The paramedics said it was fast, that he likely felt very little. I held on to that detail the way you hold on to a railing in the dark. For weeks after the funeral, I moved through our house like a visitor, touching his razor on the bathroom shelf, his coffee mug on the counter, the stack of Field and Stream magazines he always meant to read. I gave away his clothes in October and cried for 3 days straight. Then I went back to work at the dental office where I'd been a receptionist for 16 years, and I told myself that grief was something you carried, not something you cured. The years passed the way years do when you are alone and busy and careful not to want too much. I kept the house. I tended the garden. My best friend Ellen came for dinner every Thursday. I was not unhappy. I was, I think, numb, which is a different thing entirely, though it can feel the same from the inside. Looking back now, I can see the things I chose not to notice. A phone call Robert took in the garage with the door shut. A weekend trip to Columbus for a conference that left no business card, no hotel receipt, no story I could repeat back to anyone. A name, Diana, mentioned once quickly in connection with a client account, then never mentioned again. I filed those things away the way you file a receipt for something you don't remember buying. I didn't throw them out. I just stopped looking at them. It was the garage sale that started everything. My neighbor Pam suggested it. "Carol, you haven't touched half that garage in years," she said, not unkindly, in the way that neighbors say true things. She was right. I had been meaning to sort through Robert's shelves since the autumn, and one Saturday in early March, I finally pulled on an old flannel shirt and went to do it. The boxes nearest the door were easy: old paint cans, a broken leaf blower, Christmas lights tangled into something that could never be untangled again. I worked steadily for 2 hours, piling things by the driveway, finding a strange comfort in the simple act of deciding what to keep and what to let go. And then I pulled a plastic storage bin off the top shelf, and behind it, wedged into the corner where the shelf met the wall, was a suitcase. It was a brown, hard-shell Samsonite, the kind they stopped making in the 90s. I didn't recognize it. I had been married to Robert for 22 years, and I had never once seen this suitcase. I stood there for a long moment with dust on my hands and the cold March air moving through the open garage door, and I felt something I could not name, not quite fear, not quite curiosity, but something older and quieter than both. I set the suitcase on Robert's old workbench. The latches were stiff but not locked. I pressed them and they gave way with a sound like a small gunshot in the silence. Inside, stacked in tight rubber-banded bundles, was cash. $100 bills arranged with a neatness that felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. I didn't count it then. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard, but I could see that there was a great deal of it. More than a person keeps, more than a person forgets about. And beneath the top layer of bills, resting flat against the bottom of the case, was a key. An ordinary-looking brass key on a plain ring, and attached to the ring with a short loop of wire was a small white card. On the card, written in Robert's handwriting, that careful slanted printing I would have known anywhere, was an address. 4417 Norwood Lane, Springfield. I had never heard of that address. I had never had any reason to go to Springfield, and Robert had been dead for 15 years. I stood in my garage with the key in my palm and my dead husband's handwriting in front of me, and I asked myself the question that I already knew I could not unask. What exactly did I know about the man I had been married to? I did not sleep that night. I put the suitcase in my bedroom closet behind the winter coats, and I locked the bedroom door as though someone might come for it, which was irrational, because I lived alone, and the only person who had ever known that suitcase existed was Robert, and Robert was in the ground at Woodland Cemetery on the east side of town. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and tried to think like a rational woman. The money. I made myself think about the money first because it was the most concrete thing, the thing with the fewest possible explanations. In the morning, I took the suitcase out again and counted it at the kitchen table with the curtains drawn. Bundle by bundle, bill by bill. My hands had stopped shaking. I had gone past shaking into something flatter and colder. By the time I finished, the number was sitting in front of me like a verdict. $94,000. $94,000 in cash, hidden in my garage, by my husband in a suitcase I had never seen. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat very still. We had not been a wealthy family. Robert worked as a mid-level accounts manager for a regional insurance company. Steady work, decent salary, nothing that would explain $94,000 in untraceable cash. When he died, his estate was modest. The house, a 401k with roughly $60,000 in it, a used Ford pickup that I sold for $4,000. I had never questioned any of it because there had been nothing to question. The will was simple. The accounts were clean. The probate attorney, a quiet man named Garfield who smelled of pipe tobacco, had said everything was in order. But this money had not been in order. This money had been in a wall, in a suitcase, with a key and an address that Robert had apparently decided no living person needed to know. I thought about the years of careful budgeting, the summer we couldn't afford to replace the water heater and Robert borrowed from his mother, the year I picked up extra shifts at the dental office so we could take a trip to Florida for our 20th anniversary. All of that while $94,000 sat 30 feet away in a Samsonite suitcase. The rage came then, clean and unexpected, like stepping through ice, and I let myself feel it because I thought I had earned it. But rage is not a plan. By noon, I had made myself eat something, toast, half a banana, and I had made a decision. I was going to the address on the card. Not that day, not that week. I was going to give myself time to think, but I was going to go. Whatever Robert had been hiding at 4417 Norwood Lane, I had a right to know. I had been his wife. I had sat in the front row at his funeral. I had received his friends' condolences and thanked them and meant it. I had grieved him honestly and completely, and whatever he had done behind my back, I was owed the truth. The first thing I did was practical. I photographed every bundle of cash with my phone before putting it back. Then I photographed the key and the card. front and back. Then I searched Robert's name and the address together online and found nothing. I searched the address alone and found a property listing from 2011. A small house, 2 bedrooms, assessed at about $120,000, owner listed as a trust with a name I didn't recognize. Hale Family Trust. Hale. The name meant nothing to me. I wrote it down. The second thing I did was call Ellen, not to tell her everything. Not yet. But because I needed to hear a friendly voice and because Ellen was the most sensible person I knew. I told her I had found some of Robert's old paperwork that confused me, and I was thinking about calling a lawyer. She said that sounded wise. She offered to come over. I told her I was fine. After I hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, looking at the word I had written on the notepad in front of me. Hale. I thought about the phone calls in the garage. I thought about the Columbus trip. I thought about the name Diana, mentioned once and never again. My plan, when it finally took shape, was simple. Step 1. Drive to Springfield. Don't call ahead. Don't announce myself. Just drive there, park down the street, and watch. See what the house looked like. See who went in and out. Gather information before I did anything that could not be undone. Step 2. Find a lawyer. Not Garfield. Someone new. Someone who had no prior relationship with Robert's estate. Step 3, if necessary, go to the bank where Robert had his accounts and request a full transaction history. Whatever he had hidden, money leaves a trail. I had learned that from years of listening to Robert himself talk about his clients' finances at the dinner table. He had told me the truth about other people's lies. He had just never told me about his own. I looked out the kitchen window at the yard, the garden I had tended for 15 years, the oak tree Robert planted our first spring in the house, the garage door that was still standing open from the morning, all the ordinary details of a life I thought I understood. How well do we ever really know the people we love? I didn't have the answer, but I was going to find it. I drove to Springfield on a Wednesday. I told Ellen I had a dentist appointment in Columbus. The kind of small lie that comes out so easily, it frightens you a little. I left Dayton at 10 in the morning, taking back roads because I wasn't ready to feel like I was in a hurry. The March countryside was brown and flat, the sky the color of old dishwater, and I drove with the radio off and both hands on the wheel and the address typed into my phone's GPS like a destination I had every right to visit. Springfield is not a large city. It took me less than 20 minutes to find Norwood Lane. I drove past the house once without stopping. A careful pass, slow enough to see but not slow enough to look suspicious. 4417 was a well-kept ranch-style house with cream-colored siding and dark green shutters. A concrete path led to a covered front porch. There was a late-model silver Honda Accord in the driveway. A wind chime hung near the front door. Flower boxes on the porch railing, empty this time of year. The whole effect was of a house that was genuinely lived in and genuinely cared for. I parked 2 blocks away and sat with my coffee going cold in the cup holder. I watched for 40 minutes. A woman came out once to check the mailbox, mid-40s, dark hair cut short, wearing a gray cardigan over dark jeans. She moved with the easy authority of someone in her own home. She pulled out a small stack of mail, looked through it quickly, and went back inside without looking up. She did not see me. She had no reason to. I drove home without stopping. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with what I had seen, but I had seen it. The next morning, I called an attorney. Her name was Patricia Novak. A colleague at the dental office had used her 2 years earlier in a property dispute and described her as thorough, calm, and not afraid to push. That was exactly what I needed. I made an appointment for Friday and told the receptionist it was about estate matters. Patricia Novak's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown. She was in her late 40s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and the focused expression of someone who charged by the hour and meant to earn it. I sat down across from her desk and I put the photographs of the cash on the table, then the photographs of the key and the card, then the printout of the Hale Family Trust property listing. She looked at everything without touching it, then looked at me. "Tell me all of it," she said. "Don't edit." So I did. She asked me questions I hadn't thought to ask myself. Was I certain the cash was in the garage before Robert's death? Had anyone else had access to the garage in the intervening 15 years? Had I received any contact from anyone connected to a trust or an estate in Robert's name since his death? Had Robert ever mentioned Springfield? The answer to all of them was no, except I paused. Except one. About 6 months after Robert died, I had received a letter. I had nearly forgotten it. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize stating that Robert had a personal account at a financial institution in Columbus and asking me to contact them to discuss its disposition. I had been deep in grief, and the letter had felt like one more bureaucratic thing to handle. And I had called the number, and the man on the phone, polite, professional, had told me the account had already been closed and the funds dispersed per the account holder's prior instructions. I had accepted that. I had not asked questions. Patricia Novak's expression did not change, but she wrote something down. "Do you have that letter?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "In a box somewhere." "Find it," she said, "and don't speak to anyone about this yet. No family, no friends." I drove home with a strange feeling sitting in my chest, not quite relief, not quite dread. Something in between, something that felt like a door opening. I found the letter that evening in the 3rd box I searched, in the spare room closet. The law firm's letterhead read Hale and Carver, attorneys at law, Columbus, Ohio. I sat down on the edge of the spare bed and held the letter and felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. Hale. The same name as the trust that owned the Springfield house. I had held this letter in my hands 15 years ago, and it had meant nothing to me. Now it meant everything. I called Patricia Novak's office the next morning and left a message with her assistant. That afternoon, Patricia called back. "I've done some preliminary research," she said without preamble. "The Hale Family Trust was established in 2004. Robert Merritt is listed as a co-grantor." The year was 2004. Robert and I had been married 19 years. He had been alive. He had been sitting across from me at the dinner table, asking me how my day was. "The primary beneficiary of the trust," Patricia continued, "is listed as Diana Hale." There it was, the name I had heard once, 15 years ago in connection with a client account. Not a client, a woman with a trust and a house and a wind chime by her front door, and a life that my husband had apparently helped build while I was picking up extra shifts to pay for our anniversary trip to Florida. How long does a person look away before looking away becomes choosing not to see? I did not cry. I had, I think, already used up that particular response. What I felt instead was the cold, clarifying certainty of someone who has finally found the question that fits all the answers. I told Patricia to proceed. This was the point of no return, and I knew it, and I stepped over it without hesitating. Patricia moved quickly once I gave her the go-ahead. Within a week, she had filed a formal petition with the Clark County Probate Court to reopen Robert's estate on the grounds of undisclosed assets. She had also submitted a request to the Ohio Division of Financial Institutions for records related to the Columbus account referenced in the Hale and Carver letter. It was, she explained, a deliberately wide net. We did not yet know the full shape of what Robert had hidden, but the legal machinery, once set in motion, was difficult to stop. I went about my ordinary life and waited. The call came on a Thursday evening, 11 days after I had first sat across from Patricia's desk. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Merritt." A man's voice. Smooth, carefully neutral, the voice of someone trained to sound reasonable. "My name is Marcus Hale. I believe you've been making inquiries about a property in Springfield. I think we should talk." My heart knocked hard against my ribs, but I kept my voice even. "Mr. Hale?" "My sister has asked me to reach out. We understand this may be confusing for you. There are aspects of Robert's affairs that weren't fully disclosed at the time of his death. We'd like the opportunity to explain." "I have an attorney," I said. "Any communication should go through her." A pause. When he spoke again, the reasonableness had thinned slightly. "Mrs. Merritt, I'd strongly encourage you not to let this get complicated. The property in Springfield is legally held in trust. The cash you found, well, it's an open question where that money originated, and questions like that tend to go in unexpected directions when courts get involved." I understood him perfectly. He was suggesting that I might not want officials examining the source of that money too closely, that perhaps some of it had origins that would embarrass me, that I should take whatever quiet arrangement he was about to offer and be grateful. "My attorney's name is Patricia Novak," I said. "Her office number is listed publicly. Good night, Mr. Hale." I hung up and sat shaking for 5 minutes. Then I called Patricia. "They've made contact," I told her. "I expected they would," she said. She was untroubled. "What did he say?" I recounted the call as precisely as I could. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "He implied the money's provenance might cause you legal exposure." "Yes, that's a hollow threat. Unless you participated in concealing it, you have no liability. You found it. You reported it to counsel. You've done everything correctly." She paused. "This tells us they're worried. People who have nothing to hide don't make calls like that." She was right. The call had shaken me, but it had also confirmed something. Marcus Hale was not reaching out in good faith. He was reaching out because the petition had frightened him. The following week, a certified letter arrived from Hale and Carver. It was addressed to my home. Inside was a one-page document claiming that the cash I had found was loan proceeds, advanced to Robert Merritt by Diana Hale in 2007, and that the Hale estate had a legal claim to recover those funds. Attached was a notarized promissory note. Robert's signature was at the bottom. I stared at that signature for a long time. It looked like Robert's handwriting, but something was wrong with it. Slightly too neat, too uniform, as though whoever had produced it had been careful rather than natural. I photographed it and sent the image to Patricia immediately. 2 days later, she called me back. "I've had a handwriting analyst look at this informally. His opinion is that this is almost certainly a forgery. Not a crude one. Someone who knew Robert's signature and copied it carefully, but forged. They had fabricated a legal document. That was not a defensive move. That was desperation." Patricia filed a motion requesting that the so-called promissory note be submitted to the court for formal forensic examination. Marcus Hale's firm responded with a barrage of filings, motions to dismiss, challenges to jurisdiction, requests for delays. The paper was flying from both directions now, and I learned that legal warfare is conducted slowly and expensively, and with a great deal of paperwork that means very little until suddenly it means everything. I held my ground. I answered every document Patricia sent me. I wrote down everything I remembered. I stayed off social media. I did not call Diana Hale's house. I did not drive back to Springfield. And then, after 6 weeks of this, I woke up one morning and found that I could not get out of bed. Not because I was ill, because I was exhausted in a way that sleep did not fix. The adrenaline that had carried me this far had finally burned out, and underneath it was the grief. Not fresh grief, but the old grief I had never finished, now cut open again and raw. I had loved Robert Merritt. Whatever he had done, I had genuinely loved him. And he had sat across from me at dinner and asked how my day was and known every single time what he was hiding. I called Patricia and told her I needed a few days. She said that was fine, that nothing was on fire, that I had time. I called the dental office and took 3 personal days. I drew the curtains and I slept and I ate soup and I watched old movies and I let myself feel every single thing I had been holding at arm's length for 6 weeks. The betrayal, the humiliation, the strange, aching grief of mourning someone you were in the process of realizing you had never fully known. On the 4th day, I got up, made coffee, and opened the curtains. I was still standing. That was enough. The offer came on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after I returned to work. It arrived by email, not through Patricia's office, directly to my personal address, which told me Marcus Hale had done some research. The subject line was, "A fair resolution for everyone." I read it once standing at the kitchen counter in my work clothes, then forwarded it to Patricia before I had my first sip of coffee. The offer was elegant in a cynical sort of way. Diana Hale was prepared to acknowledge that certain of Robert's assets had been commingled between his households. In exchange for Carol Merritt dropping all legal proceedings and signing a full release, Diana was offering a one-time payment of $30,000 and clear title to the house on Clover Street, which, Marcus noted, was technically an asset that could come under renewed scrutiny if the estate were fully relitigated. That last part was the hook. He was suggesting, with a lawyer's careful indirection, that if I kept fighting, I might end up losing the house I had lived in for 30 years. He was betting that the threat of losing my home would break me. I sat with the email for a full day before calling Patricia. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think he's bluffing," I said. "I think so too. Your ownership of the Clover Street property is clean. Robert's name was removed from the deed in a standard refinancing in 2006. It's yours, free and clear. He either doesn't know that or he's hoping you don't." A pause. "They're offering $30,000 to make a $94,000 problem disappear. That tells you how worried they are. What does a woman do when someone offers her money to stop asking questions?" I had an answer. She declines. I instructed Patricia to send a formal response. We did not accept, and we would not be considering settlements at this time. Patricia worded it with the specific neutrality of legal correspondence, which is its own kind of cold. After that, nothing happened for 3 weeks. That silence was, in some ways, harder than the activity had been. When Marcus was calling and filing motions, I knew where he was and what he was doing. The silence meant he was waiting, watching, deciding on his next approach. I felt it the way you feel, eyes on your back in an empty room. I found myself checking my car in the parking lot before I got in, looking twice at unfamiliar vehicles on my street, checking the locks before bed with more care than usual. Not paranoia exactly, something more like heightened awareness, the particular alertness of a person who has learned that not all threats come announced. It was Ellen who saved me from the worst of it. I had kept her at a careful distance through the early weeks, following Patricia's advice. But Patricia had said no family, no friends in the context of not letting information leak to the other side. Ellen was neither family nor a leak. She was the most trustworthy person I knew, and I was lonely in a specific way that only a friend can address. I told her everything on a Thursday evening over pasta and wine at her kitchen table. All of it. The suitcase, the money, Diana Hale, the forged promissory note, the emails. I told it the way you tell a long story when you have been carrying it alone for too long, in a rush that becomes more orderly as you go. Ellen listened without interrupting until I was done. Then she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Carol, he didn't deserve you. He never deserved you." It was such a simple thing to say, and it hit me somewhere deep and necessary, the way simple, true things do. "I'm not sure I care anymore whether he deserved me," I said. "I care about what's mine." Ellen raised her glass. "Then let's make sure you get it." She did not offer advice or strategy. That was Patricia's domain. What Ellen offered was the thing that strategy cannot provide, the reminder that I was a person, not just a plaintiff. She sat with me for 4 hours that evening. We talked about Robert, the real Robert, the complicated one, the man who had been genuinely funny and genuinely kind in certain ways and genuinely dishonest in others. We talked about the 22 years of marriage and what of them was real and what of them I was now obligated to reassess. We talked about Diana Hale, whom neither of us knew, who had perhaps also been deceived in ways neither of us could fully map. I drove home after midnight, and for the first time in 2 months I did not check the locks twice. The case was proceeding. Patricia was thorough. The handwriting analysis was in process. The financial records request had produced partial documents that were, Patricia said, suggestive. I was not going to be offered a settlement. I was going to be given a reckoning. I went to bed and slept 8 hours without waking. She came to my house on a Saturday morning in May, Diana Hale. I was in the garden when I heard the car. I stood up, pulled off my gardening gloves, and watched a silver Honda Accord, the same one from the Springfield driveway, pull to the curb in front of my house. Diana got out alone. She was wearing a tan blazer over a white blouse, dark slacks, low heels. She looked, in person, like a woman who had made an effort. Her dark hair was neat. Her expression as she walked up the path was arranged into something meant to convey openness, even warmth. I did not move toward her. I stood at the edge of the garden and waited. "Mrs. Merritt," she said. She stopped a few feet away, leaving space between us, which I recognized as a deliberate choice. The body language of someone who has thought about this encounter and prepared for it. "I know I'm the last person you expected. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced." "You should have gone through my attorney," I said. "I know, I just—" She exhaled, looked down at her hands briefly. I thought, if it were just the two of us, woman to woman, we might be able to talk more honestly. Woman to woman. The phrase landed with a particular quality. I had heard it before, in various versions, from various people who wanted something from me, and hoped that an appeal to shared identity would lower my guard. I kept my expression neutral. "What would you like to talk about, Miss Hale?" She looked at me directly then. Her eyes were brown, steady, carefully composed. "I know what it looks like. I know what you must think of me. But Robert told me about you. He said you were practical, rational, that you didn't let emotion cloud your judgment." I noticed what she was doing, flattering me with my dead husband's supposed praise, recruiting him as a posthumous character witness for her position. I felt the pull of it, the strange, involuntary response to hearing Robert's voice filtered through someone else's words, and I held myself still against it. "He told me a lot of things, too," I said. Something crossed her face. Not quite guilt, something more complex. She shifted her approach. "The legal proceedings are going to cost both of us a great deal. You know that. Marcus says it could go on for years. Years of depositions, of financial records being examined, of—" she paused, "of things being made public that might be painful for everyone." There it was, the second angle. The warning that prolonged litigation meant exposure, of Robert's double life, of my marriage's humiliations, of things that might embarrass me publicly. She was betting that my pride, my privacy, my desire to protect whatever was left of my marriage's reputation would be enough to make me fold. I thought about the $30,000 they had offered. I thought about the forged promissory note. I thought about Patricia's voice saying they're worried. "Ms. Hale," I said, "I'm not afraid of the truth becoming public. I didn't create this situation. Robert did. Whatever comes out in the course of these proceedings is his legacy, not mine." Her composure cracked slightly, just at the edges, just enough. "He cared about you, Carol. Whatever you think, he—" "Please don't tell me what my husband felt," I said quietly. "You don't have that right." The warmth went out of her face all at once, like a light being switched off. What replaced it was something older and less managed. Frustration, and behind the frustration, something that looked very much like fear. "You're making a mistake," she said. Her voice was flat now. "Marcus has resources you don't. He will drag this out until you can't afford it. He will make you wish you had taken the settlement." "Then he'll make me wish it," I said. "But I'll still have the truth, and the court will still have the forensic analysis of that promissory note." She held my gaze for a few seconds longer. Then she turned and walked back to her car without another word. The Honda pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. I stood in the garden for a long time. My hands, I noticed, were trembling slightly. Not from weakness, I thought, but from the sustained effort of holding myself in check. I had been afraid during that conversation, not of Diana herself, but of the thing she represented, the possibility that Marcus Hale had resources I couldn't match, that he could turn the legal process into an instrument of exhaustion, that I would eventually run out of money and time and willingness before he did. But the fear, when I examined it honestly, was not a reason to stop. It was, in fact, information. They had sent her in person because the legal strategy was not working. She had come to my house on a Saturday morning, without warning, without her brother, because the formal channels had failed to move me. That was not the behavior of people who were confident. That was the behavior of people who were running out of moves. I went inside, washed my hands, and called Patricia. "She came to my house," I said. A pause. "In person?" "Yes." Another pause, this one with a different quality. "That," Patricia said, "is a gift." The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in July. Clark County Courthouse, courtroom 4B, 9 in the morning. Patricia had told me to dress simply, to speak only when directed, to let her handle the room. I wore a gray blazer and flat shoes, and I braided my hair back the way I used to when I was a girl, because it felt like a version of myself that knew how to be steady. Marcus Hale arrived with 2 associates. He was younger than I had imagined. Mid-40s, well-cut suit, the kind of physical confidence that comes from years of being told you're the smartest person in the room. Diana sat in the gallery, not at the table. She was wearing black, which struck me even then as an odd choice. The matter before the court that morning was threefold: the petition to reopen Robert's estate, the forensic determination regarding the promissory note, and the origin of the $94,000. Patricia presented first. She had built the case with the methodical thoroughness I had come to rely on. The handwriting expert, a certified forensic document examiner from Columbus, testified that the promissory note bore multiple indicators of forgery: inconsistent pen pressure, letter form deviations, inconsistent with known samples of Robert's signature, and microscopic ink layering, suggesting the signature had been applied in a single sitting rather than naturally. His confidence level was 92%. He had testified in court 47 times. He was not rattled by Marcus's cross-examination. Then came the financial records. Patricia had obtained, through the court order, full transaction histories from the Columbus account referenced in the Hale and Carver letter. The account had been opened in Robert's name in 2003. Between 2003 and 2009, regular deposits had been made into it, amounts ranging from $2,000 to $8,000, always in cash, always at intervals of 4 to 6 weeks. The total amount deposited over 6 years was just under $300,000. The account had been emptied and closed 11 days after Robert's death. The withdrawals, all cash, had been made by a single person using a notarized power of attorney signed by Robert in 2007. The name on the power of attorney was Marcus Hale. The courtroom was quiet when Patricia read that last sentence. I watched Marcus's face. He had been composed throughout the morning in the manner of a man who has spent years in courtrooms and learned not to react. But at the sound of his own name connected to that power of attorney, something moved behind his eyes, a rapid recalculation, like a chess player realizing 2 moves too late that the board is lost. The Hale Family Trust, Patricia continued, was established with funds drawn directly from this account. The Springfield property, purchased in 2004, was financed in part by those same funds. Robert Merritt was a co-grantor of that trust, yes, but he was not the author of this arrangement. The financial records indicate a pattern consistent with systematic coercion. Specifically, evidence that Mr. Hale used his position as power of attorney holder to convert assets belonging to Mr. Merritt's primary estate and channel them into instruments that benefited himself and his sister. Marcus was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is a characterization unsupported by—" "Mr. Hale," the judge said without looking up from her notes, "you will have your opportunity." He sat down. His 2 associates were exchanging glances. When Marcus's turn came, he was less smooth than he had been at the start of the morning. He challenged the handwriting expert's methodology. He argued that the power of attorney was legally executed and that his client withdrawals were authorized. He produced correspondence between Robert and Diana that he claimed demonstrated a voluntary, ongoing financial arrangement. Patricia let him finish. Then she introduced a single additional document, a letter written by Robert Merritt, dated March 2008, addressed to no one in particular, a letter that had been found in an envelope taped to the inside of the suitcase's lining, which I had only discovered when Patricia, at my instruction, had the case examined more thoroughly. It was 4 pages in Robert's handwriting. I had read it. I would not read it again, not in full. But certain passages had been submitted to the court, and Patricia read them now in the same calm, factual voice she used for everything. Robert wrote that he had made a mistake, that what had begun as an affair had become something else, a situation he could not exit because Marcus held financial leverage over him. Records of a tax irregularity from early in Robert's career that Marcus had discovered and held in reserve. The cash Robert had accumulated over the years had been his attempt to build a private reserve, money Marcus did not control and could not seize. Robert had not known how to tell me. He had not known how to end it. He had been, he wrote, a coward. He had written it down, all of it, in the suitcase, almost as if part of him wanted to be found out. I sat at the plaintiff's table, and I did not cry. I had cried enough in private. Here, in this room, I felt something cleaner than grief, something that was almost, despite everything, the relief of a question finally answered. Marcus Hale did not lose control dramatically. He was too practiced for that. But he stumbled during his subsequent remarks, repeated himself, contradicted a point he had made earlier about the timeline, snapped once at Patricia in a way the judge noted aloud. Diana in the gallery had pressed both hands flat against her thighs and was staring at a point above the judge's head as though she were watching something no one else could see. The judge recessed. She would deliver her ruling within 2 weeks. As we filed out of the courtroom, Marcus stepped close to me in the corridor, not threatening exactly, but deliberate, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "This isn't over," he said quietly. I looked at him and felt nothing in particular. "Of course it is," I said. The ruling came on a Monday. Patricia called me at 8:15 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, and I had learned, over the past months, to answer her calls without bracing myself too hard. She always got to the point, and there was no use tensioning up before she reached it. "We won," she said. 2 words, 11 months of work contained in 2 words. I set my coffee cup down carefully. The judge had ruled in full on every matter before the court. Robert's estate was reopened. The probate court assumed jurisdiction over all assets connected to the Hale family trust that had originated from Robert's concealed account, including the Springfield property, valued at current assessment at $147,000, and the remaining liquid assets of the trust, which had been frozen pending the ruling. The forged promissory note was declared legally void. The $94,000 I had found in the garage was ruled part of Robert's undisclosed estate and would be treated accordingly in the final settlement. The Springfield property was ordered sold. After legal costs and the final estate calculations, my share of the recovered assets came to just under $210,000. I sat with that number for a long moment before I could make myself repeat it back to Patricia, just to be certain I had heard correctly. She confirmed it without hesitation. Marcus Hale fared worse. The judge's ruling included a formal referral to the Ohio State Bar for investigation of Marcus's conduct in executing withdrawals under the power of attorney. The referral covered potential violations of fiduciary duty, possible fraud, and the submission of a document, the promissory note, that the court had found to be a forgery. Bar referrals do not automatically end careers, but they are not small things. They are matters of public record. They follow a person. Within a week of the ruling, Marcus's firm, Hale and Carver, issued a statement that he was taking an indefinite leave of absence. Additionally, Patricia had quietly coordinated with the Ohio Department of Taxation, who had been separately interested in the concealed account once its existence became part of the court record. Robert's estate owed back taxes on the undisclosed income. That liability was assessed and settled against the estate, meaning, in practical terms, against the trust's assets rather than mine. I went to Patricia's office to sign the final settlement documents on a Thursday afternoon. She stood up when I came in, which she had never done before, and she offered her hand. "You held your position when a lot of people wouldn't have," she said. "I had a good attorney," I told her. She smiled. "A real one, not the professional version." "You had that too." I drove to the cemetery on the way home. Woodland Cemetery, east side of Dayton, the quiet part where the older graves are. I parked and walked to Robert Stone. Simple gray granite, his name and dates and nothing else, because I had not been able to think of the right words at the time. I stood there for a while. The afternoon was warm and still, and the grass was thick from the summer rain. I had thought I might be angry, standing there. I had thought I might feel the old grief, sharpened by everything I now knew. But what I felt was more complicated and more quiet than either of those things. Robert had been a man who made a terrible choice and then lacked the courage to undo it, and who had been, in his final years, apparently trapped in the consequences of his own decisions. He had loved me, I still believed, partially, imperfectly, alongside something else that he should never have permitted to begin. His letter had not absolved him, but it had explained him. An explanation is not nothing. "I found the suitcase," I said aloud to the stone. It felt important to say it, to close the loop. I drove home, and when I turned onto Clover Street, the house looked the same as it always had. The yellow kitchen behind the front window, the oak tree Robert planted, the garden I had tended for 3 decades. Mine. Not because no one had tried to take it, because I had not let them. I went inside and called Ellen. "It's done," I said. She cried a little. I let her. Then she asked if she could come over, and I said yes, and I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving without knowing what I was saving it for. Now I knew. That was 3 years ago now. I am 58 years old. I live in a house on Clover Street in Dayton, Ohio, and the kitchen is still yellow because I decided I liked it that way. The oak tree has had a good few years. It put out more leaves than I ever remember seeing this past spring, as though it were finally getting enough light. With the settlement money, I did 3 things. The first was practical. I paid off the last of my mortgage. The house is mine outright now, in every sense of the word, and there is a specific satisfaction in that fact that I didn't know I was missing until I had it. The second was personal. I retired from the dental office. 27 years is long enough. I took a pottery class in the fall, badly, enthusiastically, with no talent whatsoever, and then an oil painting class in the winter, and discovered that I have a passable eye for color and a complete inability to render anything with straight lines. My painting instructor, a cheerful man named Graham, has assured me this is not a disqualifying flaw. The third was something I had thought about for a long time. I started a small financial literacy program at the community center. Saturday mornings, free of charge, aimed mostly at recently widowed women and newly divorced women, and women who had spent their marriages not fully understanding the financial picture of their own households. I am not a financial advisor. I am not a lawyer. But I have a particular kind of knowledge now, and it seemed wrong not to use it. The women who come to those Saturday sessions are mostly women like I was, trusting, competent in their own domains, slightly embarrassed to admit there were aspects of their shared financial lives they did not understand. I tell them, the embarrassment is the trap. The embarrassment is how you end up standing in a garage 15 years too late, holding a key to a life your husband built without you. That is not a lecture I give gently. It is a lecture I give from experience. Ellen comes occasionally and hands out coffee and glares at anyone who looks skeptical. She is, as she has always been, the most dependable person I know. As for Marcus Hale, the Ohio bar concluded its investigation 14 months after the ruling. He was suspended from practice for 2 years for violations of fiduciary duty and for his role in the preparation and submission of the forged promissory note. He did not lose his license permanently. The system is, in this regard, more forgiving than I might have wished. But he lost his firm. Hale and Carver dissolved within 6 months of the bar referral becoming public. His name, which once meant something in certain Columbus legal circles, now means something different. I do not take pleasure in that, or rather, I try not to. Some days I am more successful than others. Diana Hale sold the Springfield house to pay legal costs and settled in Columbus. I do not know her daily life, and I do not seek to know it. She was deceived by Robert, at least in part. The degree of her willing participation in Marcus's more deliberate wrongdoing was never fully adjudicated, and I have learned to live with that ambiguity. She was not innocent. She was not the worst person in this story. Life has a way of containing both of those things at once. What I know is this: she was left, as I was, to sort out the pieces of a life that a dishonest man had partially constructed for her. The difference between us is that I sorted mine out on my terms. My garden is extraordinary this year. The peonies are particularly good, blousy, excessive, almost embarrassingly abundant, which is exactly what peonies should be. I cut a bunch for Ellen last week, and she put them in a blue pitcher on her kitchen counter and sent me a photograph. I look at that photograph sometimes and think about how much had to happen for me to reach this particular Thursday afternoon. The suitcase, the key, the courthouse, all of it, and how unlikely it seems, in retrospect, that I am here and happy and growing flowers. But unlikely is not the same as impossible, and impossible is never the same as inevitable. I kept going. That, in the end, is the whole of it. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is not about husbands or suitcases or money hidden in garages. It is simpler than that, and older. Know your own life. Know the financial shape of it, the legal shape of it, the shape of what is yours and what is owed and what has been promised. Not because you distrust the people you love, but because love alone is not a document. Love does not hold up in probate court. I was a trusting woman. I am still a trusting woman. I am simply no longer a blind one. What would you have done, standing in that garage, key in hand? I'd love to know. Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story stayed with